What is up, YouTube? It is the Dual Threat Podcast here, your daily news source for all things sports. I'm one of your hosts, Drew.
And I'm the other one, Jacob.
Thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure to hit that like, comment any differing opinions you have, and that sub button. Also hit that notification bell. It helps us out a lot. As you can see, we're going to have to switch it up a little bit. We are college students, and so we're kind of, separated for the Christmas break coming up. So we'll be Zooming. We'll be doing a lot of different things coming up. Maybe cutting back a little bit on the video amount just because of how hard it is with living in different cities and whatnot. But we had to make a video tonight. College Football Playoff Committee just came out with their top 10. We're going to talk about our top 10, give y'all our opinions about their top 10 as well. So, Jacob, who do you got at number 10?
Before we get into that, I just want to give a quick shout out on last week's video of how Florida can make the playoff. Larry Brown said, "Make your bed, dude. Professionalism." So I did. I made my bed. Hey, thank you for the constructive criticism, and I'm really glad you commented that. Anyway, getting into my top 10, I'm going to start off with the same number 10 that the college football playoff has. I'm going to go with Miami. Last week, I had Indiana here and Wisconsin at 9. Obviously, things change. Miami has looked very solid. De'Aaron King has been good. I mean, they've won a couple games that are close that maybe shouldn't have been as close, like NC State. But when it boils down to it, they're 7-1. And I think looking at the college playoff rankings, Oklahoma's 11, Indiana's 12, Iowa State's 13. Like, I see Miami over all those teams. So I'm going to put Miami at number 10. What about you?
So this is where we're already going to differ on my number 10. I'm going to switch it up with you. This is going to be my only 2-loss team. No, it's not Georgia. It's actually Oklahoma. I have them at number 10. They, to me, have improved tremendously since their last loss to Iowa State, which has turned out to be a pretty good team. As you said, they're only ranked 13th. They had that bad loss to Kansas State, but it seems like Oklahoma, when they're a good team, they always lose to Kansas State for some reason. I mean, they did that last year. They did it this year. It seems to be a yearly thing. But, I mean, they come off that loss from Iowa State, and they're currently on a 5-game win streak. Spencer Rattler has looked very good. I mean, he's not Heisman level like everybody said he was going to be coming in. I mean, he had probably the most hype besides maybe Mac Jones and, of course, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. But he's looked great as a quarterback. They have improved a lot. I mean, they just beat the living crap out of Oklahoma State this past weekend, 41-13, and Oklahoma State was a top 6 team not too long ago. So I got to give them credit. I'm going to put them in the top 10. And that's going to lead me to my number 9 pick. And I have Northwestern here. They just beat Wisconsin. A lot of people would say that you should rank them a little bit higher, but here's my issue with Northwestern. Wisconsin had I think it was 5 turnovers in this game, and 3 of them were on Northwestern's side of the field, Wisconsin's side of the field. And maybe on 2 out of those 3, they didn't even capitalize and score any points. I think the final score was or at least at some point it was 17-7 after all those turnovers. And it's just like, how do you not put points up on the board? Yes, Wisconsin has a pretty good defense. But I mean, if you get the ball on your own 40-yard line or on Wisconsin's 40-yard line, you better at least kick a field goal or something. You got to put up some points. And so that's where I'm going to kind of put them down a little bit. Of course, they have their own destiny. They can control that. If they win out, then they'll go to the playoffs. If they beat Ohio State in the championship, I mean, I think an undefeated Big Ten team gets in this year. I feel like that's kind of obvious. But yeah, so that's going to be my number 9 team. Who do you got?
Yeah, I also have Northwestern. Like you said, they didn't necessarily look great in this game against Wisconsin. Yes, they had 5 takeaways and could do nothing with them. They punted 9 times, missed a field goal, had a couple touchdowns, had a field goal, but they did not look great. But at the end of the day, they beat a top 10 team. They're 5-0 in the Big Ten. I had Oklahoma at 11. They were right. I was considering them or Miami for number 10. So I definitely get what you're saying there. I think the Northwestern feels the same as Miami, just without that loss to Clemson. It's like they haven't looked super good per se, but they are winning games and they're 5-0, just like Miami's 7-1. So I don't think you can penalize them for it. And that's where the college football. Do they have them at 9 or like 8 or something?
They have them at 8.
8. Okay, so I mean, same area for probably a lot of the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think you put them at 9. Going into number 8, it's pretty similar for me. Here on out, honestly, it gets pretty similar for me to how we had them ranked last week. This shocked me when I saw BYU as number 14 because I have them at number 8 still. I think nothing changed, and clearly the College Football Playoff Committee saw the AP rankings and were like, y'all are nuts because they have them at number 8, and I think they should be number 8, but they put them at 14. That blew my mind. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. Zach Wilson, that's their quarterback's name, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's insane this season. He 2,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, only 2 picks. Like, yeah, it's BYU. They played Boise State's their best game this season, but still, like, he's putting up crazy numbers. They're 9-0. They just came off of a 48-point win, and you dropped them to 13. I don't know. I think it's pretty crazy, but at the same time, the playoff committee does what they want. They put Georgia at 8 or 9. So, I mean, really, what are you going to do? But yeah, I have BYU at 8.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. See, if anybody watched last week, I actually had BYU above Cincinnati. I'm going to go ahead and drop them. Cincinnati ended up beating UCF, which was a big win. I mean, they only won by 3, but UCF is a pretty good program for not being in the Power 5 and whatnot. But back to what you were saying about BYU, if you look at BYU and Cincinnati, both of their wins, I believe the AP poll has Boise State at 31 ranked this week, and then BYU has a big win over this is just sorry, I think it was SMU maybe. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Cincinnati has that win over SMU, and they're 26 in the AP poll, and both scores were pretty similar. So it's kind of like, what was the College Football Committee thinking? And I'm not going to say that I can read their minds, but I feel like it's because BYU turned down Washington this past weekend, or this upcoming weekend, to play them because they wanted to see where they were ranked first, to see if they wanted to play somebody in the Power 5, because if you know they're ranked like 6, they don't really want to ruin their chances. And so that's why I think they ranked them so high. I think they're saying, look, if you want to get in, you better agree to play with them, or we're not going to rank you very high. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But yeah, BYU being at 14 is very low, considering that them and Cincinnati are pretty similar. I think somebody was DMing me actually about how Cincinnati and BYU could possibly play December 5th because they actually both have that day off, and they were thinking about playing each other. And my question is, like, what does that really prove? I mean, it proves which one is better, and if there's a spot open, that person's going to take it. But why would you not want to schedule a Power 5 team and prove that you can beat the teams that all these other teams are beating, and that you can compete with the best the best teams? That's kind of where I'm thinking. But BYU and Cincinnati, I'd love to see them in a bowl game, but I mean, if you're trying to get in the playoffs, I feel like you should go with the Power 5. And so, spoiling it ahead, I actually have Cincinnati at 7. Move them up. They looked good against UCF, and they only won by 7. I think a lot of people are begging Cincinnati to be moved up to 6 or 5 even, but it's kind of like UCF, yeah, they're a pretty good program historically. They're not great this year. They are a 3-loss AAC team, so it's kind of like not really that great. I mean, they lost to Memphis and Tulsa as well, so I mean, a win over UCF is pretty big. It's not move you up to number 5 or number 4 big, especially by only 3 points. So, what do you think? Who do you got at 7?
Yeah, I also have Cincinnati. Like you said, they're very similar to BYU, less pass heavy. Desmond Ritter only has 1,800 yards compared to Zach Wilson's 2,700. They're a lot more run heavy, obviously. They have 3 rushers over 300 yards. Desmond Ritter being one of them. He is over 500 yards. They're also really, really good on the defensive side of the ball. They have 13 interceptions and 6 forced fumbles, which 13 interceptions is a lot through 8 games in the season. And I think they have a little bit of a different identity than most teams in the top 10. I mean, you look at it, all these teams have fairly good passing attacks for the most part, and Cincinnati doesn't necessarily have that, but they're winning games and they're winning them big. And you look at that SMU game, like you said, SMU's 7-1, I think, with their one loss getting blown out by Cincinnati. So I don't think you can put them anywhere other than 7. They're better than BYU, and they're not as good as the top 6, which I guess I can lead us into. Number 6, I have Florida. We talked about this last week. I put Florida above A&M. I didn't see anything that makes me feel like they should be dropped, but seeing the playoff committee's rankings, I was thinking last week more of if I saw a rematch who I thought would win, and I thought Florida would win. But when it comes down to it, A&M has the head-to-head. They have a worse record technically because they have had these last few weeks off because of COVID, but they basically have the same record, 6-1, 5-1, and A&M just has the head-to-head. So there's no place you can put Florida other than 6 in my eyes. What about you?
So before I talk about my number 6, I kind of want to explain a few things. Number 1, I don't have Oregon in my top 10, and I'm assuming you don't have Oregon in your top 10, just because they are an undefeated Pac-12 team. They're the highest-ranked Pac-12 team. The problem is there's only 2 ranked Pac-12 teams that won't end up playing most likely until they get to the Pac-12 championship, and Oregon is their best team, and they did not look good against UCLA. I mean, I'll just leave it at that, 38-35. UCLA had a backup quarterback, had a lot of injuries on defense, and I mean, everything was really going. It should have gone in Oregon's way. It should have been a lot more of a game a lot less of a closer game and more of a blowout. But so, I mean, I just don't have Oregon in the top 10. Neither does the committee, and neither does Jacob. And so that's actually going to lead me into number 6. And this might actually come as a shock to you. I actually have Ohio State at number 6. We talked a lot about Indiana last week and how they could have possibly made the championship. They looked like they had a great offense. And my thing about Ohio State is, yes, since Indiana has a great offense, they looked good. Ohio State's secondaries were struggling against Indiana. And, you know, Indiana has a pretty good offense, but if you put them in the playoffs with the way they played last night, they're just going to get destroyed. They're going to get dominated by every single player. And as well as having those struggles on defense, Justin Fields looked bad. He looked really bad. And I know this is probably his worst game that he'll have in his career, but 3 interceptions is not acceptable if you want to be considered the top 2 quarterback in college football, especially in a top 10 matchup. And, you know, I mean, I think a lot of people would agree with me when they say Indiana does not have a better defense than Alabama. So, or Clemson, or, you know, whoever you put in that number 4 spot. So I'm actually going to drop Ohio State. They ended up winning by 7. They were up big. And then Indiana made some adjustments at halftime or something. And that game just changed completely. And you know what? Ohio State in that first half, maybe even just the first quarter, really looked like that Ohio State from last year. And seeing the way they struggled in the second half on defense, I don't think I can put them in the top 4 like they were earlier. I think if you match them up against any top 5 team, at least at the moment, I don't think they win the game. So at least for like my top 5. So that's just kind of how I am. Ohio State isn't really the team they were last year. And this year, with the conferences not playing each other at the beginning of the year, you really have to do eye tests to rank. That's kind of why it's hard this year. So that's why I'm going to put Ohio State at 6. They did not look really that impressive to me. So going into my number 5, I actually have Clemson here. I've talked about this before in the past. Clemson doesn't have an impressive win yet. They do have that loss to number 2 Notre Dame, and it was in double overtime, which is pretty impressive. But a win is a win, and a loss is a loss. You don't have an impressive win yet. I can't rank you above Florida and A&M. They both have impressive wins that Clemson doesn't. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I can't rank them at the moment above Florida and A&M team just because of that big win, especially because we haven't seen Trevor Lawrence in a month. I mean, he could come back and just be terrible, or, he could most likely be the player that he has been in the past and be really good. But I need to see a healthy Clemson play against a decent team before I can start ranking them higher. And so I'm going to have to put them at number 5. Who do you got at number 5?
This number 5 is where I have A&M. They haven't moved in the last 3-4 weeks or whatever. They haven't played in the last 3 weeks. They definitely should be above Florida. I could see you putting them above Ohio State. I can't put them above Clemson. I mean, I think Clemson's weaknesses, their real weaknesses, have been on defense these last couple weeks, but their struggles on offense weren't there with Trevor Lawrence. And I still think with him, they are a top 2 offense in the league, maybe 3. I could argue Florida above them, but still, I mean, with him, their offense is right up there with Bama and Florida's, and their defense has been injured. And I think when they're healthy, they're going to be better on both sides of the ball. So I can't put A&M above them. I do think it's pretty close between A&M and Ohio State. Like you said, for all the reasons you said, Ohio State did not look good. Justin Fields did not look good. Their defense held them to 7 points at halftime, but then the second half just didn't show up, didn't exist. Justin Fields threw 3 picks. The thing that Ohio State does really well, same as Clemson, same as Alabama, is they have a really balanced run-to-pass game and on offense, and I think that is going to help them in the long run. Master Teague 26 carries for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns this week, and I think that is going to help them long-term in those big games, because I think if Justin Fields is having a bad day, they can still rely on their run game. But, yeah, I think A&M, we haven't seen them in a few weeks, so we honestly this week against LSU don't really know what we're going to get. I can almost guarantee you they're going to run the ball a ton. Their offensive line is going to be great. Kellen Mond is going to do just what he needs to. His numbers will probably make him seem like he's really good, and he'll just be there kind of facilitating while the rest of the team just runs all over the LSU team. I can't imagine LSU even comes close to A&M this week, and I don't think A&M is going to have really any trouble winning out. So at that point, it's just, can somebody in the top 4 slip up to where they jump them and get in? And I guess only time will tell for that. But yeah, if you couldn't tell, by the way, I said I was talking about Ohio State. I have them at 4. They're undefeated. Clemson's not, but they looked horrible this week. And they have time to rebound. They have really, I want to say 3 more games that aren't really going to be challenges: Illinois, Michigan State, and Michigan. They have those 3 games to get it right before they play probably Northwestern in the Big Ten Championship, and that'll be their next big game. So if they can get it figured out, which I have full faith that they will be able to get it figured out at some point, then they're going to be the Ohio State that we know and love. I don't think they're as good as last year. I don't think their defense is anywhere near as good as it has been recently, but I do think their offense can be good, and we've seen that even in the first half against Indiana. It's just a matter of, is Justin Fields going to blow up in the second half like he did this game They're not going to win a lot of games if he does that, but he has time to figure it out, I think. So I put them at number 4.
Yeah, I was going to talk about how you talked about how Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State all have those balanced offenses. I actually think A&M is really getting there. Their run game is phenomenal. Their passing game is getting a lot better. Kellen Mond has really improved over his time at A&M. We've watched him for a while now. It feels like he's been there for 20 years. Him and Felipe Franks, they feel like they've been in college football for 20 years. But I've got Florida at number 4. And I mean, if you couldn't tell, I'm really SEC heavy. And I still didn't even put Georgia in the top 10. So I don't even know what the college football committee was thinking. But I've got Florida at number 4. They've looked phenomenal, of course. That first half, or actually that first quarter against Vanderbilt actually looked really scary. I think it was 3-10 after the first quarter, maybe 10-10. And then Florida ran away with it. So, I mean, that first quarter made me think, wow, like, is Florida really that good? But then, yeah, so Florida pops off, beats Vanderbilt. Not a great team, obviously. They're 0-7, but they beat them as they should have. So they're not going to drop. I moved them up just because Ohio State doesn't look very good, in my opinion. So I moved them down. It's not really Florida moving up. It's just Ohio State moving down. So I got them at number 4, and then I got A&M at number 3 because of the same reason. A&M hasn't played in 3 weeks, and I will tell you this, and I don't think I've talked to you about this. If A&M doesn't beat LSU by at least 14 this weekend, I think I dropped them out of my top 5. That's just my personal opinion. I think that, especially with the way that A&M and LSU kind of rival has been these past few years, I think A&M will run up the score this weekend. And even though they may be kind of rusty, I mean, you look at Florida, they came back from not being able to play a month and then just, beat Missouri by a lot. So I don't see why A&M can't do the same thing, especially to the worst defensive team in the SEC, even worse than Vanderbilt. I think they allow maybe 11 points or 9 yards per play. And that's just kind of like A&M should be getting 14 yards per play against a bad LSU defense. And so I expect A&M to beat LSU by a lot this weekend. So if that doesn't happen, I don't really know where I put A&M. I might put Florida above them and just maybe think that Florida game was kind of a fluke. But that's just my opinion. I've got them at number 3 right now. I obviously really like them, but if they don't really perform this weekend, then that's really going to bump them down for me. Obviously, it doesn't really matter where you put A&M right now, as long as they're, in the top 5, just because they don't control their own destiny, kind of like how these other teams do. If A&M wins out, they could still not make the playoffs just because of that pretty bad loss to Alabama earlier in the year. So, a lot of things have to happen to them. I think if you're an A&M fan right now, what you really are praying for on your knees is that Notre Dame loses a game before that Clemson game, just to make sure, just so, they don't put 2 ACC teams into that playoffs, and they would put 2 SEC teams, I believe. I mean, unless they put 2 Big Ten teams, but I don't really see that happening with Indiana losing to Ohio State, and then Northwestern beating Wisconsin, and then Wisconsin and Indiana play later on this year. So it's just kind of like, unless Northwestern runs the table, and then they maybe put Ohio State in as well, but I just don't see that really happening. So, yeah, if you're an A&M fan, you really want Notre Dame to lose a game. I think the best bet of that happening is this weekend against North Carolina. They had some kind of poll on Twitter today, and Notre Dame was the best. According to everybody on Twitter, there was a poll on ESPN's account that said Notre Dame would be the best chance of being upset this weekend against North Carolina. So, yeah, this is the weekend that A&M fans really need to be Tar Heel fans. And, I know Mac Brown is the coach of that team, and that's not really their favorite person in the world, but that's who they're going to have to go for this weekend. And that's who I got at number 2. Obviously, I got Alabama at number 1. I assume you have the same. What do you got?
Yeah. Following Clemson at number 3, I have Notre Dame at 2. I mean, you can't put them anywhere else. They're 8-0. They have a big win. They have done everything right. It's just a matter of whether they can beat bad teams. And we talked about it a couple of weeks, maybe last week. Notre Dame doesn't beat the bad teams like they should. They don't beat bad teams by 40 like Bama does. They don't beat bad teams by 60 like Clemson did against Georgia Tech. It's weird to see a 12-7 game against unranked Louisville by number 4 at the time. It's weird to see 45-31 against Boston College, who granted has a fairly decent offense, but they're not that high-powered dominant team like everybody else is, or like Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State, I guess, kind of are against the really bad teams. And it feels like this would be a statement win for them to play a not really bad team in North Carolina and come out and beat them by a good amount. If they do end up losing, like you said, I mean, if you're an Aggie fan, you really needed Clemson to win the first time they played, because then, assuming Clemson wins the ACC championship, A&M's pretty much a shoe-in for that number 4 spot. They could still get in, but yeah, if they lose to UNC, both ACC teams in the championship will be 1 loss. They're not putting a 2-loss ACC team in over a 1-loss SEC team. So, yeah, like you said, if you're an A&M fan, you want UNC to win this game. I don't know how likely it actually is. UNC's been – I mean, they started off really good. They got up to number 5. But after losing to Virginia and Florida State, I don't know if they can bring that same type of play against a good Notre Dame team. I mean, Notre Dame's strength is their defense, it feels like. They show up in big spots on defense and don't give up a whole lot of points for the most part. And Ian Book needs to show up. Notre Dame just needs to win games. That's what it comes down to. They win games, they make the playoff. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, I got them at 2, and then I got Alabama at 1. We've talked about it. There's a huge gap between 1 and everybody else, it feels like, this season. Feels like Alabama is how they are every year, and nobody else is how they are every year. Ohio State's not normal. Clemson's not normal. Even, like, the other SEC teams, Georgia's not normal. And so it feels like Alabama is – it doesn't seem like they're going to lose any game, and it doesn't seem like they're going to win any game by less than 14 from here on out. And, I mean, if I were a betting man, I would first put some money on A&M to win the national championship. Plus 20,000 are the odds on them. But then I would, whatever the odds are for Bama, I would put some money on Bama, because I can't envision a world where they don't win the Natty this year. It just seems like they're so much better than everybody everywhere, and they don't have a super good defense. But even so, like, they've never had a Georgia or an Auburn level defense. They've just had a defense that's always been good enough to stop you a couple times, and you can't stop their offense. And that's the exact same thing as they are this year. So I think Bama is the clear-cut number 1. I think they're going to be for the rest of the season, and I don't see them getting knocked off at any point this season at all.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, their biggest matchup of the regular season, at least, with their 2 rescheduled games as well, with LSU and I think it was Mississippi State, maybe, or was that LSU? Anyways, they have Auburn this weekend. Auburn has been known to really upset them in some seasons, like last year. That's probably not going to happen this year. Alabama is just too dominant, and I know it's a rival game, and that really changes things. This year, it just looks like Alabama is so top tier that it's not really going to change anything. So I agree. I don't see anybody knocking Bama off. I don't see anybody beating Bama this year. I mean, it just looks like Bama is, like you said, Bama is Bama this year, and nobody else is who they usually are this year, and at least out of the top, like, elite teams that usually are. So that's just was kind of weird. And yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, if you're a betting man, you're putting money on Bama, unless you just happen to think that, the Big Ten or the ACC is just so much better than the SEC. which I don't really think is likely. So, yeah, I mean, Bama number 1, long ways away from Notre Dame at number 2. But yeah, it's just kind of weird because out of the top 10s that we have, there's really 3 teams that don't really control their destiny, but could possibly get in to the playoffs. I guess BYU isn't really one of them since they're at number 14 now to the playoff committee. But really, Cincinnati and A&M need a lot of things to happen. If Notre Dame loses a game like we talked about, that really helps. But if A&M loses a game as well, then that might be a chance for Cincinnati to hop in. If there's a 2-loss ACC loser and there's a 2-loss Big Ten loser, then you never know. They could slide into that 4th spot, but, Bama would have to beat Florida as well. And, Cincinnati does have a chance of getting in the playoffs, but a lot of things have to go their way. That's just kind of how it is with A&M as well. And so it's kind of hard to really put them anywhere. I mean, you look at it, number 2 through number 7 can really just be like kind of jumbled around because it really doesn't matter at this point. What really matters is what's going to be in a few weeks after all these big games kind of happen. You really know who's going to end up winning their divisions and their conferences and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, do you got anything else? All right, well, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button as well, and hit the notification bell. That really helps us out a lot. We just hit 100 subs like we talked about on our last video. Thank you all so much. We will continue to try and make as many videos as we can. We'll make a few tonight and post them throughout the week. I think we've got our previews coming up, and as well as we'll have the Friday night lines this week. We didn't have them last week. We apologize, but we went 5-0 the past week before that, so you might want to stick around and subscribe. We do have big plays. We make big plays over here. We go 5-0. We make people money. So thank y'all for tuning in again, and have a great day.